Welcome to Neural Nexus Podcast, where we explore the hottest topics shaping the world. Let's dive in.
All right, so let's dive into this whole COVID origins thing. It's been bugging me for years now. Like, where did it actually come from?
Yeah.
Figuring that out. I mean, it could change so much, right?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's not just some scientific puzzle. It's a question it has huge implications.
Yeah, for sure. And there's this recent Fox News article that's really adding fuel to the fire. It's all about this newly released CIA analysis.
Oh, yeah. Is this the one where the CIA is now saying they're leaning towards the lab leak theory?
Yeah, but here's the catch. They're saying it with, like, low confidence. What does that even mean? It's like they're dipping their toes in the water, but not ready to actually jump in.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. So low confidence in the intelligence world basically means they're just not certain. It's like they're trying to put together a puzzle, but they only have like a handful of pieces.
Okay. Yeah.
You might have a hunch about what the picture is, but you can't really be sure.
Right. And what I thought was interesting is that the article says there's no mention of any new evidence. That, like, prompted this shift. It's like they looked at the same information.
Yeah.
And then suddenly had a change of heart.
Sometimes all it takes is a fresh perspective to make a difference. Like in this case, the CIA has a new director, John Ratcliffe, and apparently the review was ordered by Jake Sullivan, who was President Biden's national security advisor. So new people, new analysis.
Well, interesting. But the article also points out that this guy Ratcliffe has been pretty vocal about supporting the lab leak theory for a while now. He's even criticized the Biden administration for, like, allegedly suppressing information.
Right. And he's gone on record saying that he thinks the intelligence community actually does have enough evidence to back up the lab leak theory. He even claims it's the only explanation. That actually makes sense.
Wow. So is this the legitimate shift in the CIA's assessment?
Yeah.
Or is this more about politics?
Yeah.
And then aligning with, like, a certain narrative?
It's really hard to say for sure. Intelligence agencies, they aim to be objective, but they're not immune to outside pressures. And this whole issue of COVID-19's origins, it's a political hot potato for sure.
Yeah, no kidding. What if it does turn out that the virus did come from a lab? I mean, the fallout could be huge. We could be talking, like, potential sanctions against China, maybe even reshaping how we even approach scientific research.
It really makes you think, how much are we willing to risk in the name of scientific progress? And what happens when things go wrong, even if it's unintentional?
Okay, so we have this CIA analysis saying lab leak but low confidence. What does that actually tell us? I mean, for those of us who don't spend our days like deciphering secret codes, what does low confidence really mean?
Well, it basically means the evidence they have is probably pretty patchy. Like maybe some bits are contradictory or there are just too many gaps. It's not like a slam dunk. But it's enough for them to lean in a certain direction.
So more like a faint trail than a clear roadmap.
Exactly. And this is where the lack of transparency from China becomes a major roadblock, you know? We need access to their research facilities, data on those early cases, all sorts of information. That's tightly controlled. Without that, it's like we're trying to solve a mystery, but with one hand tied behind our back.
Yeah, I see what you mean. Which is probably why, even after years of research and investigations, there's still so much disagreement about where COVID-19 came from.
Exactly. There are very strong voices on both sides, each pointing to their own set of evidence and arguments. Should we break down those different viewpoints?
Yes, please. Feels like we're standing at a fork in the road here. And I definitely want to understand where each path leads.
Okay. Well, on one side, you have those who support the lab leak theory. They often highlight the fact that Wuhan Institute of Virology, which was studying bat coronaviruses. It was pretty close to where the initial outbreak happened. So they argue that a lab accident, even an unintentional one, could have been the spark.
It's like a Myan Carroll containment breach scenario, a bit like something out of a sci-fi movie.
In a way, yes. But proponents of the lab leak theory argue that it's a plausible explanation, given the type of research that was being conducted there and the timing of the outbreak.
Okay, that makes sense. So what about the other side then? Those who believe in the natural origin theory, what's their main argument?
Well, they emphasize that viruses jumping from animals to humans, what we call zoonotic spillover, that's not exactly a new phenomenon. Think about like HIV, Ebola, even the flu. They all originated in animals. And they argue that COVID-19 likely started in bats and then jumped to humans through another animal, possibly at a wet market in Wuhan.
So it's like a chain reaction, going from bats to another animal and then finally to humans. It makes you wonder, how many of these near misses happen that we never even hear about?
It's a fascinating thought and a somewhat unsettling one, right? But it really highlights the interconnectedness of human, and animal health, and the importance of understanding these zoonotic pathways.
For sure. So you've got these two main theories, both with their own set of experts and evidence. It sounds like a real scientific showdown.
It is, and this brings us back to John Ratcliffe and his unwavering support for the lab leak theory, even with the CIA's low confidence assessment. He seems incredibly sure of himself. What do you make of that?
Well, it makes you wonder if there's more to the story. I mean, he was appointed by former President Trump, who was very vocal about blaming China for the pandemic. Could this be more about politics than science?
It's definitely a possibility. We have to remember that everyone involved in this debate, from the scientists to the intelligence officials to the politicians, everyone brings their own perspectives and their own motivations to the table. It's a very complex web of influences.
Okay, so how do we cut through the noise? I mean, for us everyday people, trying to make sense of this, how do we figure out what to believe?
It's a challenge, that's for sure. I think the key is to be aware of potential biases, to critically evaluate the information that we're being presented with, and to be open to changing our minds as new evidence emerges.
So it's about staying curious, asking questions, and not being afraid to admit when we don't have all the answers.
Exactly. And that brings us to the big question. How does this CIA assessment, even with its low confidence label, how does it change the landscape of this whole debate? Does it lend more weight to the lag leak theory?
That's what I'm eager to find out. Feels like we've just uncovered a crucial piece of the puzzle. Now we need to figure out where it fits in the bigger picture.
Yeah. Oh, it's definitely a twist. I think even with the low confidence label, the CIA shifting toward the lab leak theory is going to get people talking, especially those who are already kind of leaning that way.
It's like it gives them more ammunition.
Exactly. And it puts more pressure on other intelligence agencies and the scientific community to reevaluate their own positions. Will they follow the CIA's lead, or will this just create more division and debate? It's a fascinating time.
What about the international implications? I mean, we talked earlier about a potential fallout if the lab leak theory is proven. But does this CIA assessment, even without definitive proof, change things between the U.S. and China?
It could definitely add fuel to the fire. I mean, think about it. The U.S. might use this assessment as leverage to push for more transparency from China, demanding access to research facilities and data.
And if China refuses?
Well, that could lead to escalating tensions, sanctions, trade wars. It's a slippery slope.
Oh, wow.
On the flip side, China could accuse the U.S. of politicizing the issue and spreading misinformation.
So even without a smoking gun, this CIA assessment really throws a wrench into this already complicated relationship.
Right.
It's like they're playing a high-stakes poker game, and everyone is carefully calculating their next move.
That's a great analogy. Speaking of calculations, let's zoom in on the science side of things for a second. You mentioned earlier the potential impact on research if a lab leak is confirmed. Could you elaborate on that?
Well, one area that immediately comes to mind is what's called gain-of-function research.
Ah, yes. Gain of function. This is where things get a bit tricky. Imagine you're a scientist studying viruses. Gain of function research involves manipulating those viruses, making them more dangerous.
Hold on. Making them more dangerous. Why would they do that?
The goal is to understand how viruses evolve and potentially cause pandemics. So by studying these souped-up versions in a controlled lab environment, scientists hope to get ahead of the curve and develop vaccines or treatments before a real-life outbreak happens.
So it's like a controlled burn. You're intentionally starting a small fire to prevent a larger one from breaking out, but with viruses instead of flames.
Exactly. But as you can imagine, there are inherent risks involved. And if a lab leak is confirmed as the source of COVID-19, the debate around gain-of-function research will become even more heated.
I could only imagine people would be questioning the ethics of this type of research, wondering if the benefits really outweigh the risks.
Exactly. And that conversation is already happening in the scientific community. There are valid arguments on both sides. Some researchers say that gain-of-function research is essential for pandemic preparedness, while others believe that the risks are just too great.
It's a tightrope walk between pushing the boundaries of scientific knowledge and making sure the research is conducted responsibly and ethically. And this time, CIA assessment, even with its low confidence, throws another variable into the equation.
Absolutely. It raises the stakes and adds another layer of complexity to an already nuanced issue.
Okay, so we've talked about the potential impact on international relations, scientific research. But what about us, the everyday people trying to wrap our heads around this? What does it all mean? for how we think about the pandemic and its origins.
Well, I think it just underscores the importance of staying informed, being critical of the information we consume, and understanding that this is a fluid situation. New information is constantly emerging, and our understanding of the pandemic is constantly evolving.
So it's not just about what we know now, but about being open to learning more and adjusting our perspectives as the pieces of the puzzle fall into place.
Exactly. And that leads us to the ultimate question, the one that's been looming over this entire discussion. What happens next? What if, despite all the uncertainty, further evidence emerges that definitively proves the origins of COVID-19? What then?
That's the million-dollar question. And it has the potential to reshape the world as we know it. But before we dive into that rabbit hole, let's take a moment to recap what we've learned so far.
Okay, so we've been unpacking the CIA analysis. It points toward a lab leak as the origin of COVID-19, but they're saying it with low confidence, let's say, for the sake of argument. More concrete evidence does surface, and it confirms this lab leak theory. What then? What are the ripple effects?
It's a hypothetical with huge implications. For sure. Let's start with international relations. If a lab leak is confirmed, it could lead to a massive breakdown in trust between nations, particularly between the U.S. and China. We could be looking at a whole new era of geopolitical tension.
So beyond just finger pointing and blame, what concrete actions might we see? Well, sanctions are definitely on the table. The U.S. could impose economic penalties on China, targeting specific industries or individuals. Other countries might follow suit, leading to a cascade of economic pressure.
And how might China respond to that kind of pressure?
They could retaliate with their own sanctions, targeting U.S. businesses or interests. We could see a trade war erupt, impacting global supply chains and economies worldwide. It's a scenario with the potential to destabilize the entire global order.
It's like a domino effect, one action triggering another, leading to unintended consequences that ripple outward.
Exactly, and all this uncertainty could lead to an increase in military posturing. Both sides might feel the need to project strength and deter further aggression. It's a dangerous game, one that could escalate very quickly.
And all of this stemming from a tiny virus. It's mind-boggling.
It really highlights how interconnected our world is and how something that starts in a lab can have global repercussions. And it's not just about politics and economics. Think about the impact on scientific research.
Right. We talked about gain-of-function research earlier. What happens to that field if a lab leak is confirmed as the source of a global pandemic?
There would likely be a massive backlash. With calls for stricter regulation and oversight, governments might impose funding limitations or even outright bans on certain types of research deemed too risky.
But wouldn't that hinder our ability to prepare for future pandemics? I mean, if we're not studying these viruses, how can we develop vaccines and treatments?
It's a delicate balance, for sure. On one hand, we need to learn from this experience and ensure that research is conducted safely and responsibly. But on the other hand, we don't want to stifle scientific progress out of fear. Finding that middle ground where we can advance knowledge while minimizing risk, that will be crucial.
So it's not a simple stop-all research solution. It's about finding ways to make the research safer, more transparent, and more accountable to the public.
Precisely. And this brings us to perhaps the most significant implication of all, public trust.
Right. If it turns out this pandemic was caused by a lab leak, a human error, how will that affect people's faith in science and institutions?
It could be devastating. We're already seeing a rise in misinformation and conspiracy theories. And a confirmed lab leak could further erode trust in scientific expertise.
People might start questioning vaccines, public health measures, even the basic facts presented by scientists.
Exactly. It could fuel a wave of distrust and skepticism, making it even harder to address future health crises.
So it's not just about the science. It's about the social fabric, the shared understanding of reality that holds us together, if that phrase. What happens to our ability to solve problems as a society?
It's a sobering thought, and it underscores the importance of clear communication, transparency, and building trust between scientists, policymakers, and the public. We need to work together to navigate these complex challenges and ensure that science remains a force for good in the world.
So where does this leave us? We've explored the potential fallout of a confirmed lab leak, international tensions, scientific setbacks, and a potential erosion of public trust. It's a pretty daunting picture.
It is, but it's not a future set in stone. What we do with this information, how we respond to these challenges, is up to us.
So what can we do? How do we prepare for this uncertain future, knowing that the truth about COVID-19's origins could have such profound implications?
Well, First and foremost, we need to stay informed and engage in thoughtful dialogue. Don't shy away from difficult conversations. Seek out diverse perspectives, question assumptions, and be willing to change your mind as new information emerges.
It's about being critical thinkers, not just accepting everything we hear at face value. We need to develop those information literacy skills to navigate this complex landscape.
Absolutely. And remember, uncertainty is a part of the scientific process. It's okay to not have all the answers. What matters is that we continue to ask questions, seek the truth, and work together to create a safer, more informed world.
Well said. This deep dive has been a whirlwind of information and possibilities. We've gone from a CIA analysis to potential global upheaval, all stemming from the question of where a tiny virus came from. It's humbling, to say the least.
It is, but it's also a reminder of the power of knowledge, the importance of critical thinking, and the interconnectedness of our world.
And on that note, I think that's a good place to leave it. To our listeners, thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Keep those minds curious, stay engaged, and we'll see you on the next one.